Sports fans, it's Steel City Huddle.
Hi, and welcome to the very first episode of the Steel City Huddle podcast. LeeAnn's having some technical difficulties, so we're going to let her jump in just a second. Today we are going to talk about a couple different things, even though I don't want to talk about it because talking about it means that we're seriously considering things. We'll talk about different quarterbacks, but I want to start out by talking about TJ Watt. Um, it's not as much about the Instagram post that he made because yeah, it's cryptic, and I agree it's a little strange that someone like TJ Watt would post something like that. Um, but even if it is what everyone's saying it is, and he is asking for a way out of Pittsburgh and saying that he wants them to stop dragging their feet or whatever method he's using at the moment, I think it's important that people understand what it means when you say trade TJ, because it's not just the connection that we have to TJ. It's not just the kind of player he is with what he's meant to the city for so long. Um, the thing about trading TJ is that creates a line that you can't go back. Unfortunately, at least in my opinion, because that means you can no longer avoid the R word. And no one in football likes to use the R word. No one likes to say rebuilding. No one likes to say that, or if they do, it's in these weird terms that are different than actually saying rebuild. But when you talk about trading TJ Watt, I'm not the closest thing I can think about something that happened in Pittsburgh sports recently is when Jake Gensel was traded from the Penguins. That kind of signaled the reality of what we were looking at in regards of the rebuild the Penguins were under, because we already kind of knew it, but that was a signal. If the Steelers trade TJ Watt, that is an official signal. That is that just and so let's talk about what a rebuild means. Um, a rebuild means that it's going to be bad. Um, and that's what I need people to understand. A lot of people are referring to the Washington Commanders in regards to a rebuild, and when you look at that, all you need to do is hit the Wash that particular iteration of the Washington Commanders is an outlier. It's 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 not what you're going to get every single year. More often than not, when teams going through a rebuild, especially a team that right now, as an organization as a whole, does not has not shown that it has the ability to coach up players to draft particularly well lately. We're still waiting for some players to come in. This last recent draft was better, but still a lot of injury issues. So when you talk about a rebuild, you gotta have the right things in place before you go down that route. And the trading of TJ simply flips a switch that I don't believe you can go back from, because that's it, it's just a signal to me of what it means. And I've been watching Steeler fans this entire offseason. In fact, since Ben retired, myself included, and it's been confusing as far as the reactions that they've had. Um, so I oh, just so you know, just got word from Leanne. She's fixing all the technical difficulties. It's not going to be a problem. So you're not just going to listen to me ramble the entire time. Um, but what I've seen out of Pittsburgh fans is that I'm gonna get blasted for this when enough people see this. Um, I don't think you're ready for a rebuild. I don't think we're ready for a rebuild. I don't think the city of Pittsburgh as a fan base is ready for a rebuild when it comes to the Steelers, because we're upset about the 9-8 seasons, but then you also ask for high draft picks, and it seems like you're asking for multiple things that cannot happen at the same time. Because if we're going to be bad, we're going to be bad. Um, and the kind of bad that especially this generation of Steeler fans hasn't had. We're talking 4 wins, 5 wins. That's really painful when you're in the midst of it. I the closest thing I remember, what was it? I think early 2000s, the year Terrell Owens and the 49ers beat the pants off of the Steelers. I remember that was a very painful year, and that was like 6-win season, something like that. So in terms of really bad seasons, the Steelers don't. We haven't experienced those lows in terms of other teams that have. My brother-in-law Jake is a huge diehard Texans fan, and he has experienced real difficulty when it comes to bad records, when it comes to rebuilds, when it comes to rebuilds not working, more importantly. And that's my entire point, is that rebuilds more often than not don't work because there's number one, there's too general of an idea about what it means for a rebuild to work. I think a lot of people see the Washington and they assume that's what it means for a rebuild to work. That is not what it means for a rebuild to work. That's a ridiculously amazing outlier of multiple things happening, and honestly, a franchise that deserved it because what they had been through prior to that, it just ridiculous. But more often than not, you're going to have top quarterbacks that miss. You're going to have top draft picks that miss. You're going to have free agent signings that miss. You're going to have rebuild attempts that are swings and misses more often than you're going to have rebuild attempts that hit like Jaden Daniels. It's not what is it's not the norm. And so you talk about Pittsburgh going into something like that. And not only that, you're going into that without the unequivocally best player on the team. Not potentially, because there's other players that might potentially be the best, but to me, the best proven player on the Pittsburgh Steelers right now is the one that a lot of people are not bought into trading, but now it's come up with the whole peace sign thing about that. So it's just a genuine concern. Hey, she fixed it. Hey, LeeAnn's there.
Zac, I gotta tell you, like, math is not my strong suit. And so I freaking apologize. I'm here in Texas at my mom's house, which is already like crazy enough. And then I'm an hour behind. And so my non math brain kept thinking 8 o'clock. So I thought I had all this time. And then you're like, I'm getting on. I'm like, wait a minute, what? We got 2 hours. What are you talking about? So
Well, that's okay. If
I'm
they're
so sorry. I did tell you this
if
morning. I was like, you watch the time change, like trick me up. And sure enough, there we are like an idiot and I'm late. So I apologize.
not a problem. Well, they were listening to me ramble for a little bit, but what I was talking to the eventually everyone that will watch it is what it means with the trading if you do trade TJ Watt. And I got very blunt with Steeler fans because I said from what I've seen in the last couple seasons or just since Ben's retired, y'all ain't ready for that. You are not ready for a rebuild. You are not even close
No.
to ready for a rebuild.
I've said it before. We talked about it on other shows before that, I lived in Washington, D.C. for a long time and watched what they went through, that fan base dealing with the constant turnover and the thought process that, oh, we're going to, rebuild this team. And, I've said it before that there's an element of luck that goes into winning football. It's not just, you know, dominoes that you line up and there's this like set formula and that formula makes you win, and it's not hard to see that those things are true. I mean, all you have to do is look at like Tom Brady becoming like the greatest quarterback in all time when 31 teams passed him up for 6 rounds. So I think that that's the thing that a lot of fans get lost on. And I think that, it's crazy. I said it on Twitter yesterday that there's all this talk about how we, trade TJ. And then the same people are also posting how TJ's not any good and he's washed up. So why do they think we're going to get like 6 first-round picks for him? I just don't understand it. I don't understand the rationale.
It was surprising. What's surprising to me is the people in Pittsburgh media who I don't know if they've just been so beaten down by this offseason, but they have resigned themselves to weird things. I was listening to Mark Caboli, he was on the PM team today, and one guy actually, I think it was Mueller, said that he had resigned himself to the possibility of a third-round pick. 1 third-round pick for TJ.
That's
He said
insane.
that.
So why would you get rid of him for 1 third-round pick? Because
Be,
look, it's the same thing as like Dallas, right? They're right now, or they were yesterday. I haven't looked at the Cowboys news today, but I did an article yesterday on Micah Parsons and this kind of headbutting that's going on between him and Jerry Jones, and his extension. And people are like coming out and saying, like, so what if you save that money? Who are you getting that's as good as Micah Parsons for that amount of money? And that's how I feel about Watt. Like, he is still disruptive. He is still a game changer. He still has an impact. I do think he played part of the end of last season a little bit hurt. And I think that was a major issue. And so I think to all of a sudden, because he had a few games where you felt like he was a little off, and frankly, the whole defense sucked. It wasn't like it was just TJ. You're just going to throw that out now. It doesn't make sense.
It's incredibly confusing. And what I said before you got on is what people need to understand is if that does happen, that is a signal. It is a bright, blaring lighthouse that we are rebuilding. And if you thought it was miserable before, try playing without the most exciting player on our team.
Right.
I mean, really,
that's a really good point. I mean, he's the guy everybody gets hyped to see, TJ make these big plays. And so, yeah, then what when you play without him? What does that look like? I mean, and he is, I know that, we've heard people say before that they don't feel like he's an outstanding leader, but I think he's shown to be that way. I don't think you have to be so vocal all the time to be a good leader. I think TJ, we've heard other players say it. I had Alex Highsmith on my old show a couple years ago, and he was like in season like 3 or 4, and he said it, that just because he's not, you won't see it all the time doesn't mean he's not doing it. He's out there. He leads by example. He puts in the hard work. He helps to mentor these young guys like Herbig and helped Highsmith out a lot. And I, that makes him almost like the quarterback of that room. And you need that. To me, he is in part the glue that helps hold that defense together. We're already going to lose Cam Hayward in the not too distant future. I mean, he can't keep playing forever. And as much as I would like him to. So whether that's after this season or next season, at some point he's going to be gone. And that kind of makes TJ that like de facto, grown up in the defensive room. And we need that.
I agree. And this is my train of thought just left out. The frustration about this is just overwhelming because I don't trust this front office to do a lot right now, to be 100% honest. So why am I going to trust them with a rebuild without TJ?
Yeah.
I'm not going to trust you with even if you got a king's ransom. I'm not sure that you would know what to do with it because right now the amount of people that are saying draft Shedeur Sanders is driving me crazy.
That's ridiculous. But the thing is that the way teams, so like if you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, right? You're saying you don't have a lot of trust in this front office. But if you look at like what Andy Weidel did when he was with the Philadelphia Eagles, it was that process of like building around the guys you have now. You know what I mean? So it wasn't wiping the slate clean and starting all over. You have to. It's this constant process of attrition and turnover where you're going to lose some guys and, you play a season and you see where you're weak and you build up that area. Do you know what I mean? Through the draft or through free agency. And I think, we kind of started to do that this year, at least with DK Metcalf. And it's a weird year without a quarterback. I think it makes things really funky. And I think it has made the fan base understandably feel very unsettled. Like, how do you get in football mode when you don't even know who's going to be the most important player on the team, right? And like the scary prospect of that being Mason Rudolph and what that could mean. So I think, the idea that you just say, well, if it's going to be Mason, then like, fuck it, let's get rid of everybody on the team and just start over again, it is crazy because you'll never be able to rebuild a whole team in 5 years, let alone in 1 or 2. Do you know what I mean? So if you really do get rid of all your best players, you get maybe 2 or 3 guaranteed, hopefully guaranteed good draft picks every year, like round 1, 2, and you hope for 3, right? To be solid draft picks. And even at 2 and 3, you're sometimes looking at those players needing a year or 2 to develop, especially on the defense. They don't, they're not always day one playmakers. And so, yeah, to me, if you do that and you get rid of TJ, then you've got to start looking at how you replace those guys. And there just isn't enough money in the world to be able to do everything.
Exactly. And I've heard a lot of people say that It's almost like people are offended because the big thing is they're like, oh, well, TJ's not going to take a cent less than Myles Garrett has. I'm like, okay, how does that hurt you?
Right. What do you care?
I
And why
that's
should he? Why should he?
exactly. He's earned the right to say when Myles Garrett comes out after a snow game and rubs it in your face saying, I am the best defensive player, right off the bat, I'm like, oh, you pay him any amount to be paid more
Any
than
amount
Rudolph
of
Garrett.
money. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I certainly think that, but the same people who say that are the same people who are outraged when, people say that Myles Garrett is better or Myles Garrett should be DPOY over Watt or whatever. So, Mott was in the running for DPOY for 2024 until those last games where it was obvious something was not right with him. Do you know what I mean? And so it's a shame that cost you when you were solid for so many weeks, but it's the reality of it. It happened to Micah Parsons too. Was it last year when he got hurt? So, I mean, it happens to players. You got to be consistent for the whole year. And he had a few rough games. I don't think that was some like switch in his head that was like, okay, TJ's old and now he's washed up. We're done.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
And what you said about Mason Rudolph, I love that you brought that up because I'm just thinking if
Yeah.
I went to the other teams, because we're a four-family team, a four-team family, and my extended family. If I were to go up to the rest of them and say, "Man, we got to go into this Mason Rudolph," I have Dolphin fans, Brown fans, and Texans fans.
Right.
They would laugh me out of the room of saying,
Right.
"Oh, poor you! You just have Mason Rudolph." They're used to
Right.
going in with that. You can survive seasons without a quarterback, and I think Steelers fans don't understand that you can. You can have a fun season without having a superstar quarterback.
I argue this, on our last podcast that I don't think Jalen Hurts is Patrick Mahomes. Do you know what I mean? He's not that level of quarterback. But the Eagles have built such a good offense around him, such a good offensive line, such a good, bunch of weapons and running backs that he is able to excel. And what they've done is taken the things he does really well, the tush push and whatever else, and they've built on his strengths and they've built a really solid offense. And he doesn't have to be Patrick Mahomes or, whoever to get that team to the Super Bowl every year, to make them contenders every year. Do you know what I mean? And it's not in any way throwing shade at Jalen Hurts. I mean, not at all. I mean, I was a Hurts fan. He was at Alabama for a while, so it's definitely not throwing shade at him. I think he's a solid, good quarterback. I'm just saying he's not old Tom Brady who put the team on his back and carried him into, winning championships. That's not the case with him.
I agree, and that what the Tom Brady thing is just different because I don't think people who are in this current generation understand when you compare someone to Tom Brady, it's not just about being good. It's about that person on that field makes everyone on that field better simply because they're
Yeah.
there, and that is incredible. Even Ben
frankly,
didn't do that
players
all the
like
time.
that are anomalies. That is not the norm. I mean, even Patrick Mahomes to me has really proven to not be that guy. I know there was conversations about him being better than Brady, but I think Andy Reid does such a good job building that team up around him, and again, monopolizing on Mahomes' strengths. And it's not to say that Mahomes isn't a good quarterback. So I'm not saying he's not an excellent quarterback, right? I'm just saying that Tom Brady did that stuff consistently year after year after year. There was years where the rest of the team or the offense wasn't as good, and Brady was able to single-handedly win them games and pull things out of his ass that nobody else could. And I mean, yeah, the dude is unbelievably special and unique. And I saw today that Bill Belichick said in his new book that he feels like his biggest draft mistake was the failure to get Lamar Jackson. I thought that was really interesting. Because can you imagine if they had rolled right out of the Tom Brady era into the Lamar Jackson era? Now, as an AFC North fan, I wish he was with the Patriots. But
That's true.
Yeah.
Oh, that would have been incredibly interesting.
So how do you feel if we wind up with Mason under center week 1 as our starting quarterback? I mean, you kind of implied you feel okay with that.
Well, to be 100%, that's best case scenario to me because
better than Aaron Rodgers working out.
If you would have told me a couple weeks ago that we would still be sitting here,
oh my God,
talking about this man, I am exhausted about it. And I just genuinely hope that it just all fizzles out to be nothing, because Mason's been through enough to drag him through all of this, and then at the last minute say, "Oh wait, it's Roger." To do that to this guy again,
Well, the local reporters did say that when Mason was signed, he was told he was coming here as the backup quarterback. So if that's the case, then if that's really true, and who knows if it is, right? Because I do feel like we screwed Mason over in a lot of ways and kind of did him dirty. I will say too, though, that I don't think Mason is as good as some fans think he is. Do you know what I mean? I think that some fans look at those couple of games and they think he's something he's not. I mean, he kind of showed in Tennessee that he doesn't have the talent to make up for a bad offensive line or a lack of weapons. And while the Steelers have DK Metcalf, we still don't know what's going to happen with Pickens. Do you know what I mean? We've seen some inconsistent play from Pat Fryermuth in the past couple of years. We don't have Najee anymore, so we don't even know who our other running back is going to be. And so I do think he's walking into a Steelers offense that is not the Philadelphia Eagles offense. And so, I don't know that he has the talent to kind of overcome all that stuff.
That's a good point. If I was, especially DK Metcalf, honestly, yeah, most likely him, I would gather all of the weapons guys, the playmakers on this team, and said, guys, listen, it's our year. We're going to have a quarterback that's just going to throw it up to us as much as we want. It's up to us to make this work, because Mason does his best work when he's throwing the football really, really long. He loves that.
Yeah.
And that we had Calvin Austin, DK Metcalf, and George Pickens. All three would love that. So if everyone could just take a deep breath and get ready for what I think I'm trying to think how I worded to LeeAnn. I think I said it's a weapons-led team, not a quarterback-led team. Yeah. And I am okay with that. And that's an okay thing.
Yeah.
So when worst case scenario, we get a top 10 pick.
Yeah. Yeah. When we had Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett on the team after we drafted Pickett, right? And Mitch Trubisky played terribly, and we wound up benching him and bringing Pickett in. And then Pickett got hurt, and Mitch Trubisky came in a game, and he wound up playing really well. And I forget which local reporter it was, maybe Chris Carter, one of those guys. And they said, look, I think Mitch Trubisky really played well because he didn't have somebody breathing down his back with that constant threat of like losing his job. And I always thought that kind of was like what happened with Mason last year, 2 years ago, right? That those first 3 games that he came in and played, there wasn't going to be a Kenny Pickett coming in. He was hurt, right? He couldn't have played anyways initially. So he played really well. But then by the time it got to the playoffs and they started him in favor of Pickett, I always wondered, did he have that feeling like, oh, if I screw up, I'm going to get benched and they're going to bring Kenny in, because he was just like a totally different quarterback in that playoff game. Now, I get that the Bills were a much better team than some of the other teams we played, but I think it'll be interesting if Mason does start to see, how he really does. Do you know what I mean? It kind of answers the question once and for all if Mason can or is that guy, sort of like the situation I feel like Justin Fields is in at the Jets. I mean, this is who gets 3 chances to be a starter. You know what I mean? This is your last shot. Is he really that guy or not?
That's a good one. And I love that you brought up the fear almost of like not making a mistake and looking over shoulder, because if you mix that with what I'm surprised to find out, but has been the narrative that Mike Tomlin is risk averse in the offensive way that if you mix that, so you have Mike Tomlin over your shoulder, don't make a mistake. By the way, don't make a mistake. And then that the guy behind you is just waiting to go. That is a horrible quarterback situation. And I don't want to, is toxic too strong of a word for that situation? Because to me, that would like burn through your spirit. Like people talk about Kenny Pickett didn't want to be, I'm not defending Kenny Pickett. Just so everyone knows. They're saying, oh, Kenny Pickett didn't want to be a backup, all that. If you get kicked enough and you don't have a spirit enough, then maybe at one point it's like, I don't care what people say. I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
I can see that happening.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And you do have to wonder, look, I'm not as hard on Tomlin and the Steelers as a lot of fans are. I'm just not. I think it's pointless. I also just don't agree with it. But I do think that all coaches have some shortcomings. Do you know what I mean? And the way that you overcome those is by hiring assistant coaches who help make up for your deficiencies, sort of like in a marriage or a partnership, where the two people support each other, bring out the best in each other, right? And I think for a little while there, I think Tomlin didn't have a good supporting cast, particularly on the offense. And I think it really showed, more than just the play calling. I think the lack of trust and relationships among the players and the coaching staff because of Matt Canada. I mean, really starting back with Randy Fichtner, do you know what I mean? That just created such a bad situation for those players that I do think that there was some maybe toxic relationships or, toxic behaviors or, a lack of trust. I mean, I can certainly see all of those things.
That's a good point. And I wonder, I'm not as hard as on Mike Tomlin, like you said, as a lot of other people are, but I do hold him accountable for a certain amount of things. But
Sure, definitely hold
if you look at the Randy Fichtner stuff and onward, that was kind of Mike Tomlin getting his first chance to say, so try to flex and say, this is the guy I want. This is someone But what I'm hoping he sees now is if he looks back in the timeline and say, listen, Mike, you got your chance. Look, you called your shots this whole way. It didn't work. Good, you did your best. You really tried your best. You put yourself out there, and he did. He put himself. I will never forget the look on his face during the Matt Canada press conference. I have never seen someone look so defeated.
Yeah.
Because he did, and so he tried his best. But now, that's a good question. Do you think it is a realistic thing to hope that Mike Tomlin sees the light a little bit this season?
I do. Do you know what I mean? I just think to some degree, I think he has to. Maybe I'm overly optimistic. I mean, I've heard that before, but I have to feel like at some point Art Rooney has to be coaching Tomlin a little bit, in being a little bit more flexible about some of these things. Because look, I know that Rooney doesn't really give a shit what anybody thinks. Do you know what I mean? He's going to do what he's going to do. He doesn't care what people think about it. But at some point, that doesn't mean he still wants to listen to this every year where he makes these sweeping proclamations and then seems to do like the complete opposite. So I do think that maybe second year with Arthur Smith, there's a little more trust there. I'm hoping that he turns over the reins on the offense to him a little bit more and kind of learns from the past.
That's true, because actually in that particular phrasing in this window that we're looking into, Aaron Rodgers would be the worst possible thing because it would be Mike Tomlin again getting his guy. And that means
Aaron Rodgers getting his way because he runs his own offense. He's not going to come in and do what Arthur Smith wants him to do.
No, we've heard many people, whether it was on the last podcast or not, say I understand the desire to see that play out in some sort of a circus level, but to me, that just sounds exhausting. Like that to me, that we're the Steelers. We're supposed to be looking at the teams like the Cowboys and the Browns and the Raiders and saying, "Look at that clown show." That's not become the clown show. Right, we can watch from the stands.
Right.
So, but
yeah, I'm not sure I understand, the attraction to Rodgers. Do you know what I mean? I mean, there's a part of me, my like brain that'll go, well, he is kind of all that's out there. Do you know what I mean? This whole time he's kind of been all that's out there. Like, you got to have somebody. Does it kind of make sense, even if it's not ideal? Maybe it just makes some sense and you just kind of do what you have to do. So there's a part of me that sort of can rationalize that. But then there's another part of me that's like, our whole team thing is to not do the chaos and the drama and the nonsense, not intentionally, you know what I mean? So why are we intentionally bringing this to town? I understand it, fans will immediately point to Antonio Brown or George Pickens or whatever, but I don't think that was intentional chaos. That wasn't something that we definitely knew that this was going to be a problem and chose to bring these people on board. I think even Pickens felt, pretty manageable or whatever. I'm sure Tomlin didn't expect it to be like this level.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the bottom line, I mean, for anyone who's saying, oh, if you don't like the Steelers, you can get, it's not that. If we get Aaron Rodgers, I will not be happy for a little bit, and then I'll breathe and I'll cheer for the Steelers. I will find a way to cheer for my team. They're the Steelers. They have yet to do something that has made me not cheer
Yeah.
for them. And there's
Look,
been a
there is
lot that's
no
gone on.
player I hated more in the NFL than Michael Vick, that I had no interest in ever seeing on my team. Was glad we didn't have him. And we had him for that little bit of time. I mean, I just, wouldn't really cheer for him. I wasn't buying his jersey, but I just sucked it up and dealt with it, because I'm a fan of the team. I'm not a fan of our individual players. And so, while I can like some of them and like some better than others and cheer for them, I'm a Steelers fan first and foremost. And so if that means Aaron Rodgers, that means Aaron Rodgers. I don't have to love the idea, but I'm still going to cheer for my team.
One of my last thoughts on the thing is I recognize and respect that my view of looking at this particular thing is very different than a lot of people. I blame a little bit on the autism, but some of it is simply that I love the little intricacies and foundational and fundamental things that make football.
Yeah.
And a lot of people find that boring. I love the slow rebuilding, like you were talking about with Andy Weidel, like the slow, methodical, let's build for 10 years, not 2 years,
Right.
and all that. I love that, but it's not fun to watch. It's not always fun to
it's
watch, so
not.
I understand that.
Yeah. I think it's interesting in hindsight to look at the progress, look at the progression. Do you know what I mean? Look at how the choices that were made and how those choices played out. I do think that's interesting. But I think living it in the moment, yeah, it can be tough. It can be frustrating. I think as fans, we want things to progress quickly. We want to win Super Bowls, especially Steelers fans, and you're not winning Super Bowls during a rebuild.
Exactly. When I was starting out today, I talked about Washington a lot, and then you brought it up because
Yeah.
that's the outlier. People need to stop using that as a
But it's the
comparison.
outlier now, but it's taken them 35 years or something to get there, right? This rebuild didn't start 2 seasons ago or whenever they drafted Jaden Daniels, last year when they drafted Jaden Daniels. They've been doing this for decades with coaching turnovers and quarterbacks and terrible draft decisions and Albert Hainsworth and Robert Griffin III, and I mean all kinds of really poor decision making. And you can blame their old owner, but that it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? It's still, the outcome is still the same.
I 100% agree, and I'm one of those few people. I hope a rebuild doesn't officially happen or like all the signals
Yeah.
happen, but I'm ready for it. Like I know I've played Madden long enough. I know what it takes to actually build a team, and I just don't think the Steelers fan base is ready for it. And that kind of carnage that is going to happen amongst this fan base concerns me.
Yeah, I don't think we have to go into a full rebuild, unlike a lot of other people. Do you know what I mean? I think if we can find a solid bridge quarterback, whoever that is, and get through. Look, we're not winning the Super Bowl this year. And then next year we can manage to hit in the draft on a quarterback or in free agency hitting a quarterback. Then I think that, we can get a lot closer. I think the DK Metcalf addition on offense is huge. And I do think that puts us a step closer. I think people feel like our offense is so terrible, but they forget about all the injuries we had on the offensive line last year. So, I mean, I think if we can get back, Faltanu, Daniels, whoever, get that offensive line back to where it needed to be, or we thought it was going to be, I think it's going to be okay. Move Broderick Jones to, where he's supposed to play. And I think all of that will shape up and help them out a lot.
Okay, I agree. We're not going to win a Super Bowl, all that, but you just stick with Mason. You draft right. You build up some of the trenches. A playoff game is not out of the question, and
No.
I would love that. I'm fine with that. That's my Super Bowl this year. I under real expectations. So,
I'd be really happy to win a playoff game.
Exactly. Well, is there anything else you'd like to talk about on the inaugural episode here?
I think I'm good, but I just want to thank anybody who watched tonight. It means a lot to Zac and I. We're really excited to kind of kick this off and get it started. We're planning right now to do shows live on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m., right, Zac? So that's our plan right now. If you've been with us before on another podcast, you know that we love to do lots of interaction from viewers. So we'll be doing the show live and letting you know ahead of time and setting it up in that way so you can comment, you can send in your questions. We're also looking forward to having a draft special as well as a bunch of special guests once we kind of get this show underway. So we're really excited to have, any of you join us tonight. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And to everybody watching afterwards or watching live with us, leave us all the possible comments because this is new. We are going to be testing out a lot of different segments where we want to be flexible, but you guys drive this. You're the reason why we do this. We don't just get around here to talk about things randomly to ourselves. We talk to you guys.
And it would help us out a lot if you would like, share, and subscribe to the podcast because it takes time to help get the podcast to show up in people's YouTubes and in their algorithm. So if you don't already follow us on Twitter, follow us on Twitter. The podcast has a page, Steel City Huddle, as well as like, sharing, subscribing on YouTube would really help us out.
Exactly. And from me and LeeAnn to all you guys, you have a wonderful rest of your evening and go Steelers.